Good morning and welcome everybody to Behind the Screen. I am JM, your GM, and we are going to be back in our transhuman look, our look at science fiction and what different things we can pull out of it as game masters from the genre and how we can really tune our games in to focus on what makes these genres great. Now, we've done cyberpunk, and our last episode of exploring science fiction, we covered what are kind of the sources of transhumanism. But before I get in there, good morning to Grom, to Padre, to John, and to Mr. Bob Crum. Good to see all of you. Welcome to the chat. I'm hoping to get in on that, at least watching some of the Halloween stuff. If you don't know what Halloween is, it's going to be going live, I believe, next Thursday. John Doom can correct me or let me know. And it is the Savage Worlds sort of Halloween streamed event. So, looking forward to that. Let me just check something real quick. I have been assembling minis for my son. We are getting into Age of Sigmar. And there we go. My mic was a little soft. We're getting in Age of Sigmar. I've been assembling his Fire Slayers. Hopefully I didn't blow out anybody's ears when I made that mic adjustment. So, yeah, the Fire Slayers are gorgeous. So I'll send you some pictures, Bob. I sent you the pictures of my Ideneth Deepkin, and really excited about getting those to the table this weekend. Hey, Kirk, good to see you. So let's see here. John Doom says Thursday through Sunday and more free gaming event rather than a streaming one. That's awesome. So jump over to Pinnacle Entertainment Group. Go follow them. Go check out. They've got a Kickstarter for 2 great books. I'm probably backing at least one of them. There are... They've got the new horror companion for Savage Worlds Adventure Edition, and then the East Texas kind of horror setting that's going to be coming out. Very excited about both of those. It's on Kickstarter right now. Go over and check it out if you haven't backed it already. I'm backing at least for the horror book because I have a problem, and I love Savage Worlds, which I guess really isn't a problem. We're just going to go from there. So, transhumanism, staying as focused as I can on things. So last time we covered what are the sources of transhumanisms, because it's a fairly new genre. So we kind of held up as our exemplars things like Altered Carbon, Peter Hamilton's Commonwealth Saga and Salvation series, as well as Ian Banks, touching a little bit on the Safehold series by David Weber. My brain kind of spaced a little bit. Hey, Rook, good to see you. And yeah, Grom, I'm in the same way. The horror companion is the one I think I'm going to get. So there are what kind of mechanics do we want to see in a game about transhumanism? And so I think there are 2 really great transhuman games out right now. Probably actually 3. The 3 games that we're going to look at are Mindjammer by Evil Hat. I'm not a big Fate person, but I love the setting and I love what they did with the rules to really force the transhumanism aspect to the forefront. And then 2 games that I both run and thoroughly enjoy, the Infinity role-playing game by Modifius and Eclipse Phase, a game of existential transhuman horror from... Oh, my brain just died. I'll put the link in the notes. So, things that you want to see in transhuman games, mechanically to reinforce the things. 1, you want to see a lack of connection between identity and body, which is a weird thing for me to say. As a kind of a traditional thinker and a traditional Christian, I believe these 2 things are kind of inexorably linked. However, transhumanism, the genre convention is that these things can be completely separated. And so one of the cool things about Eclipse Phase is that they actually have a completely separate side of the character sheet for your mental stats. So your mental stats, your skills, the things that are core to your identity, and then your physical side of things. Nova Praxis, yes, that's another great one, John. Really great stuff. Thank you for bringing that one. I have those books for the Savage World side of things, and they're great. Um, so in Eclipse Phase, you can literally send your identity as packets of information from one location to another and download into a sleeve. You can actually download into new sleeves and change your physical stats. You're going on a combat mission, buy a combat sleeve, and suddenly you have a whole new set of physical characteristics that are different than your normal sleeve. I think in Eclipse Phase, like, you can even become these giant solar whales to explore the coronasphere of the sun. Like, it is bizarre and very interesting. A very interesting way to look at what does identity mean. And in fact, there are crimes in Eclipse Phase for creating copies of yourself, because if your mind is just information, transhumanism kind of postulates that you should be able to just copy data. And in fact, the Dreaming Void, the middle section of the Hamilton series, there are people who create multiples of themselves and live as sort of a hybrid commune identity. There's some really fascinating looks at what it means to be human. And again, one of the things about transhumanism, they usually involve a little bit of aliens, is this idea of what does it mean to be confronted with something non-human, while as a society we are struggling to even define what it means to be human anymore. And if you read the Dreaming Void trilogy, Hamilton really goes into the fractures that we would see in a monolithic human society when identity is so fractured. And I think there's some like good sci-fi, there's social science fiction going on here, right? Hamilton has yes, John, that Hamilton series starts with Pandora Star. So there's a duology, Pandora Star and Judas Unchained, and then 1,000 years later he does the Dreaming Void, but with the same characters, because humanity is essentially immortal, called the Dreaming Void trilogy. And so you have, I think, the Dreaming Void, the Temporal Void, and the Evolutionary Void. And then he finishes that up with a final duology that I'm not going to be able to pull out of my head at this point. You got to let me know what you think about him. I love Pandora Star and Judas Unchained. It is some of the tightest science fiction writing that I have read in recent memory. But in the Dreaming Void trilogy, in the Void trilogy, you have this weird shift for humanity. Humanity's been immortal practically for 1,000 years. And what we're starting to see is there's people who just want to exist as humans as they have, getting de-aged. There are people who start wanting to create this communal existence. There are people who want to leave the body behind and just go live in AI. There are times where the AI people re-download and come back into their bodies to go do something in physical space that they would not have been able to do in digital space. It is this really, yes, Padre, another good series. I can never pronounce it unless I'm looking at it, though. The Vorkosigan saga. So we want something that allows us to explore these ideas of identity and switching bodies and multiple copies of things. And Eclipse Phase does that very well. It's actually the focus. And you actually create, I'm going to use this term, but it's far more complicated when we get into replicating the experience. We'll talk more about this. But you create save points, if you will, for your characters. You can't die. I mean, there are ways to permanently die, but that is a rarity. Right? If your mind is constantly being backed up, like it is the Hamilton series, John Doe, death is just a matter of recovering the memory cell or downloading from the last data point that you've saved at and moving on. So we want something like that. We want something that says, hey, we are, as a human existence, no longer tethered to our bodies. We start to see that in the Infinity role-playing game with the development of Aleph and the this idea that Our AIs are starting to be allow people to either create digital new personalities or upload their existing personality to a cybernetic body. We also want to see something that like tunes in on the fact that transhumanism is technically post scarcity. So while Infinity still has us fighting out on the rim with the factions kind of doing these limited skirmishes, for the most part, everything falls under O12, which is the global government of Earth. And we see that on most cases, while there is, on some planets like Ariadna or in the Nomads, they have not truly moved post scarcity. In the core, we have a lack of need of currency. And so both games, I think Infinity uses currency, but both games really hit, and Mindjammer does this as well, really hit the idea that it's far less about how much money you have as it is about who you know and how much cred you have in various arenas. So I believe Eclipse Phase has no money. It's all done through reputation with about a dozen different factions. And so as you do jobs for them, as your cred goes up, you can call in cred to get gear. If you horribly screw up or do something really against a faction, you end up losing a bunch of cred and people can come after you. So I like this idea of factions as currency in transhumanism. When we look at the fiction, right, the Culture series, the Culture live this almost magical existence, but all of the adventures take place on the rim where people are not quite set with the Culture. Is it considered plebeious is the first one? We see the same thing in Hamilton. We see the same thing in Infinity, both the war game and the fiction and the role-playing game. This idea that what we want mechanically is less about how much money is this going to net me, and opposed to how much is my reputation going to go up. So the other thing we want in transhumanism is a lot like cyberpunk. We want tech catalogs, if you will. Transhumanism, like cyberpunk, is focused on the technology. But whereas cyberpunk tends to have this kind of clunky chrome aesthetic to it, this neon punk clunky chrome kind of feel to it, transhumanism is slick, it's hard light, it's cyberpunk sort of taken from kind of the punk aesthetic into the very glamour aesthetic, for lack of a better term. All of your tech is streamlined. It looks good. It has flair. It has flash. It's less about standing out and embracing kind of I'm going to use clunky chrome a lot today. I hope I don't stumble over it. And more about just the kind of ubiquity of this technology wherever you go. Now, Eclipse Phase does this a little differently because Eclipse Phase is also post-apocalyptic horror, because humanity didn't learn and they made AIs, and there's a reason for it in the game, but the AIs go crazy, and Earth is essentially a wasteland that you don't want to go back to. Humanity's on the edge of an existential crisis because they're on the edge of extinction. Only those personas that were able to translate off-world or were already off-world still exist. The other thing that we like about, that I personally like to see in transhumanism, is a leap beyond our solar system. And I think that has to go to with the post-scarcity and the rising above kind of the petty megacorp or the exploitation of Earth that we see in cyberpunk, right? The Hamilton, multiple worlds with aliens. Culture, multiple worlds with aliens. The Vorkosigan saga, multiple worlds. Traveler has some transhumanism to it as well, right? Multiple worlds. Again, cybernetics are ubiquitous. I don't really remember. I don't think early Traveler had any sort of upload rules, but... And in Infinity, humanity has spread out thanks to jump gates. In Pandora Star and Mindjammer, the same kind of thing. It's interesting that most transhuman fiction that I'm thinking of, save for the Culture series, does not have a faster than light capability at the start. They almost always have some sort of weird jump gate technology. No spoilers for John Doom, but that jump gate technology thing kind of gets developed in an interesting way in Judas Unchained. So even in Eclipse Phase, they have found these translation gates at the edge of the solar system, and that's the hope that humanity will actually be able to survive. Spoiler alert, for the later books of the Expanse, this is as it's moving into something that's very much more transhumanism. We see this idea that we are no longer shackled by our solar system. And again, going back to that case of identity, if humanity is no longer tied to our solar system, what does that mean? What is our identity then? In Infinity, we've fractured into several different sub-factions, all under O12. You have the anarchists of the nomads who have left and gone away and kind of are doing their own thing on three big colony ships, if I remember. One's a prison, one was a bank, and the other one is just sort of a construction fleet that has merged together. Man, Infinity is cool. I need to go back to that. So last but not least, we have some sort of alien influence. Mindjammers is sort of transhuman space opera. It's been a while since I've read it, but I remember really enjoying the setting and the feel. Infinity, the combined army is attacking through one specific planet of Paradiso, and so humanity is forced to, despite all of this tendency in transhumanism for humanity's identity to kind of split and scatter, is forced by this external threat to remain a cohesive whole. In Eclipse Phase, the threat that caused the AIs to go crazy is this alien jump gate technology and an alien AI. And so as they go out and explore other worlds, there's more likelihood that we're going to see stuff like this. Another interesting source for transhumanism, in a way, is the short-lived 2-season, I think, sci-fi show on Netflix, Another Life. And they deal with the reality of dealing with aliens and this kind of existential threat to humanity. The wormhole jump gate travel, yes, Padre. Battletech has that jump gate technology, or jump point, I should say, technology that I really, really enjoy. So that kind, you guys, the chat has posted some great other references to other science fiction series that kind of tack on this. So when we get to Tuesday, we're going to cover how do I replicate this at the table. And I think that I have some, yes, Altered Carbon's another great one, John Doom. I would say that some of the advice I'm going to give on Tuesday, I have used at the table and has been well received, but you should take it with a grain of salt. Your table may vary. I do think there's some wonderful ways at the table to replicate this idea of transhumanism, right? So in transhumanism, we're not so much worried about our character's death. Their physical body can always be remade, re-engineered, or a new sleeve can be downloaded into. But what we're concerned with is the loss of identity. There are some ways to do that that I'm going to share with you on Tuesday that I hope you guys can use in your own games. I really would like to get Infinity back to the table. I'm a big fan of the 2D20 system. My wife got me for my birthday almost the complete run of the Conan 2D20 systems, and now it's just, as I'm reading through that, it makes me want to go back and grab some Infinity and get that to the table. So who knows? That may appear at some point in the future. Oh, Kirk, glad to hear that you have some ideas to how to use that in the Fading Suns. Fading Suns is also interesting because it's far more space opera to me. But when we get to space opera, we will talk about that. John Ringo does have a series. Man, what is that one? I love John Ringo. I love Weber. They have a lot of great sci-fi. Bob, if you're looking for some great science fiction in the transhumanist genre, I would definitely hit Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained. It's a 2-book series. It's wonderful. The audiobooks are great if you have an Audible account. And I will say Hamilton is a brilliant writer in a lot of different ways. His extrapolation of current technologies and trends into the future, his world building is unparalleled, his characterization is great. He is also a writer who, the first book, he's going to put out 1 million plot threads, and you're not going to have any idea how they all tie together. And I'll let you know by the end of Pandora Star, I'm like, well, how is this 2-book series going to end? Because you end Pandora Star with dozens, if not hundreds, of little threads. And by the end of it, he has taken all of them and tied them all up in a bow, not in a contrived way, but in a brilliant sort of mystery way. John, let me know how you like him. I really enjoy that. Grom said that the series we were thinking of is the Council War Saga by Ringo. Yes. So, anyway, that brings us to the end of this episode of Behind the Screen. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to talking about ending our transhumanism series on Tuesday, and then next Thursday I have a review that I'm very excited to share with you all. I cannot say anything about it until Thursday, so tune in for a surprise review next Thursday. I was wrong. It's not this Saturday, but next Saturday that we're doing the grand campaign, but we will be here on Sunday to review the Dracula dossier. So I do not have that one, Grom. That would be fantastic. My favorite thing about there's a Monty Python role-playing game on Kickstarter right now from the guys who do Old School Essentials. You should go check it out. The best part about it is when it says what ages is this game for, and it says the middle ages, of course. Oh, and 12 plus. Like, even the writing on the Kickstarter feels like Monty Python. So go check that out. Professor, I'm sorry you missed it. It will be live on YouTube here later today or tomorrow. I really enjoy transhumanism science fiction, so I'm looking forward to Tuesday where we talk about we talk about how to replicate this experience at the table. And I have what I think are some very dastardly and despicable ways for you to challenge what it means for your players to have a character, and how to challenge that identity. So until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming, and I will talk with you all on Tuesday. Have a great weekend, everybody.